Hi everyone. We're going to verify inverse trig functions with simply true or false. What you need to know is we have three tables here. Table 1, Table 2, and Table 3. We're dealing with sine, cosine, and tangent. And as you know, with inverse functions, the domains got restricted. So for sine, the restrictions from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. And when you do the inverse, the restriction is going to be negative 1 to 1. And the same thing for cosine. Cosine is going to be from 0 to pi. And we're still from 1 to negative 1. So remember, the restrictions for sine is in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So it's this area in here. So it's negative pi over 2 to pi over 2 on your unit circle. We can't even go over here. So we only can deal with this area right in here. And then for cosine, our restrictions is in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. That means we're only dealing with this top portion of the unit circle from 0 to pi. And tan is almost like sine, except we have undefined here. So basically, this undefined means we're going from, on the inverse, negative infinity to infinity, because of it just goes off and gets closer and closer to the value. So we just got some basic things here, and we're going to go over and see if this is true. So what we're going to do first is look at the inner function. The inner function is right here. And so we're going to see if this is true. Is this true? Yes, because on my inner function, if I go back to the table, we do have a negative pi over 6 here. So you're looking at the regular function, you're looking at your x. This is like your x and your y. Remember, on inverses, you switch the y and the x. So that would be true. And it's because negative pi over 2, our restrictions are between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So negative pi over 6 is in between our restricted domain. And that's why this would be a true. Alright, next one. We look at our inner function, and again, if you go back to the table, there is no 2 pi over 3. 2 pi over 3 is right here in quadrant 3. So basically, that's a false. And the way you would write that is, here's our restricted domain. And so 2 pi over 3 is not in between in our restricted domain. So this would be a false. So you can look at the table, or you can just look at your restricted domain. Now this one, we're going to look at the inner function. Now the inner function is in between negative 1 and this is our x. So our inner function is should be in between negative 1 and 1. So we're looking at the inverse. When you're looking at the inverse, you're looking from negative 1 to 1. So 2 is not in between negative 1 and 1. So it's not in that restriction for f of x equals sine, inverse sine of x. So this is false. Our inner function is here. So in our inner function, our domain is this. So you ask yourself, is negative 1/2 in between negative 1 and 1? And it is true, it is. So this is true. Again, you can look at the table, or you can just look at your domain for your inverse function and your regular function. Okay, so we're back to our inner function. For cosine, we're looking at our restricted domain. In our inner function, we're dealing with the angle, and this is going to be pi. So we're asking ourselves, is negative pi over 6 in between 0 and pi? And that's not true. It's not. So that would be false. This one, are looking at our inner function. We're looking to see is 2 pi over 3 in between 0 and pi. If you want, you can write this as 3 pi over 3, because that clearly shows that it is. That should be equal, so this is true. This one, now we're looking at our inner function, it's the inverse function. So that has to be in between negative 1 and 1. So we're going to write this as negative 1 is negative 1/2 in between negative 1 and 1. And this is true, so you write true. And again, we have the inner function. So that our domain is negative 1 to 1. And 2 is not in between negative 1 and 1. So this would be false. And tangent. Okay, tangent for our inner function, we're in between negative pi over 2, but it can't equal it, and pi over 2. It's almost like sine, but it can't equal it. So is negative pi over 3 in between pi over 2 and negative pi over 2? And it is, so this is true. It's almost like sine again. For this one, it's the same thing. Are we in between? Is this in quadrant 1 or 4? And it's not. So 2 pi over 3 is in quadrant 2, and tangent is restricted to quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So this is false. Okay. Here, our inner function is our inverse function, and for that one we have, negative infinity is less than or equal to x is less than infinity. So we're asking ourselves, is 2 in between negative infinity and infinity? And yes, it is, so this is a true statement. And for our last one, our inner function is the same thing. So we're going to write this as negative infinity to infinity. And negative 1/2 is in between negative infinity and infinity, so this is true. Okay? That's all. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.